Okay. You'll see it recording on that side. All right. Hey, Kelly. So we are doing a kind of an interview for Fit for Fertility, and this is Kelly Chivvis. She actually is the business manager of Fit for Fertility, and we're going to go through and just tell her story about how she got into fertility, fitness, fertility, and how she ended up having her son Gunnar naturally without medications and IVF or IUI. So Kelly, start off with what got you into fitness in the first place? Because I know you had been running and doing a few things before when you got diagnosed with infertility. So tell me a little bit about why you got into fitness in the first place.
So fitness has kind of just been my life. I was an athlete from like little on, always sports. My brother was in sports. My dad was the coach of all the sports. Like, it is not natural not to be moving and not in some sort of fitness environment or a sports world. A lot of people like that, when they go into college, and if they don't play a college sport, they kind of lose themselves because they don't have an end goal for a game or for whatever. They don't know how to work out. And I was one of those people that kind of lost myself for a little bit and didn't know where to go once you finish sports. I played water polo in college, but once I stopped that, why do you work out? What do you do? So I lost it for a little bit. Wasn't working out for several years, and that was very, very hard on me. I went through a lot of depression with that, just because you're losing a part of yourself that's been there the whole time. It's like a smoker who stopped smoking after 35 years. What do you do with your hands? It's the same idea. At the same time as I was kind of going through depression with that, I was finding out that I had a lot of different problems going on inside of me, things I didn't talk about, things I tried to kind of push on my doctor and ask, and then was kind of shunned away. Essentially just women problems, the bleeding, the pain, the weight gain, the mood swings, everything that was going on. And I kept getting put on different kinds of birth controls, and just kind of the standard, here's another pill. And I didn't like that. So finally one day I sat down in my doctor's office after several years of kind of hinting that something was wrong and being dismissed, and said, this is what's going on in my body. I'm having horrible pain. I'm horrible bleeding. I'm bleeding for like 8 weeks for a period. Like, we need to figure something out. And I was very, very pushy. I wasn't leaving her office that day until I found out what was going on. Long story short, it turns out that I had endometriosis. And the only way, of course, to diagnose that is through surgery. So I had my surgery, and they found it, and they removed some of it. But the doctor point blank told me, he's like, it is what it is. It's there. It's going to keep coming back. He's like, I think you have one of the rare cases that surgery actually aggravates it. So we're probably going to accelerate the growth of it. Your options at this point are hysterectomy, to continue having these kind of surgeries. There's all kind of medications we can put you on. But these are your options pretty much. You're probably never going to conceive. And if you do, it's going to be a terminal pregnancy. It's not going to work. It was very blunt and kind of just, that's what's going to happen. Sorry about it. And that's very scary as a mid-20s girl who's unmarried. And, I had a supportive boyfriend. We'd been together for many years at that point, but what the hell? So I literally went online and started Googling, and this was just a few years ago, and there wasn't a lot of information out there. It wasn't really talked about, what do you do besides pop the pills the doctor tells you to pop the pills for? And I knew I wasn't healthy at the time, and I knew I was depressed, and I had to just figure out something to fix this. And I realized I need to get myself happy before I could figure out how to fix what was going on. So I turned back to fitness. I didn't know where to start because, again, I'd always done contact sports and team sports and things like that. And I had a girlfriend who was on her own weight loss journey, and she had lost a crap ton of weight running. And she said, look, just come to a couple races with me. We'll run. We'll do some 5Ks. I'll just get you started. And so I did. And it's ironic because I hated distance running, hated distance running. 1 year in high school, I did cross country, and I was the worst person team, probably in the district. I would just walk the whole thing because I was so bored and I hated it so much, and I gave no efforts to it. So it was ironic that I was turning to this as my therapy. Yeah. And I did. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it, the more I wanted to progress in it. So I started doing more strength training, and I started getting back into what I love, which is speed and agility workouts, which reminds you of every basketball camp you ever went to. And I started to find myself that way, and running became how I celebrated my success in my training. I used that as my judgment to see how well my training at home was doing. So
and did that help you with your stress level? Were you pretty stressed absolutely. At that point about, with the diagnosis and, all of that?
It definitely did for me in particular, because where I lived was in the mountains, and it was a very beautiful country scenery where it's a lot of God's country. You know, you see a lot of cows, you see the local farm dogs, but you don't see people. You know, it's just you, it's the beautiful scenery, it's the animals. I was one of those people who didn't listen to music. I was kind of listening to my breathing, listening to just the sounds of the world around me. And I used that time to just bawl my eyes out, whatever was going on. Sometimes I was crazy laughing. Sometimes like whatever emotion needed to get out was during that run. And a lot of people don't understand that until they're actually in that scenario. But it's true. I mean, there would be days where I couldn't take the world anymore, and I would go for a run and I'd come back and I'd be normal again. And so
it was a good stress reliever, just to let you know, your time, the me time.
Yeah. Because that's where I was used to my whole life. That's how I processed me. You know, you had a good game, you had a bad game, you had, you know, stress from school, stress from boyfriends, and you had to forget it and go play a basketball game. Same thing. You just need that outlet to just get it all out. You know, sometimes in contact sports, it was to hit somebody a little bit harder. This way, it was to run a little bit harder. So it truly helped. And as I was doing all this and getting my fitness back together, I started seeing progress in my pain relief, you know, with the endometriosis and PCOS. And I realized that I was onto something. Like, if obviously the feel-good endorphins were kicking in, doing something, I was losing body fat, which is a huge problem for PCOS.
So you were also diagnosed with PCOS?
Yeah, PCOS, I was diagnosed when I was 18 years old. At this point, when I was running, would have been like the mid-20s. But the only reason why I got diagnosed with that, again, after years of complaining I had problems, was literally one day in my dorm room, I woke up soaked in blood, like completely soaked in blood, and we found out I had a cyst that burst. We had no idea. So literally that day I had to pack up where I was and drive back to my parents' house and go to the doctor in tears and all the 18-year-old girl emotions of, why am I bleeding out? Like, what's going on? Luckily I had an absolutely amazing roommate who kind of just scooped me up and threw me in the shower and handled all the stuff that was going on. But that's the only thing I knew. And at that time, it wasn't really talked about. Like, no one really cares. Again, you're given a new birth control and you're told to suck it up and move on. No one talks about it at all. And it's certainly not something you bring up at the lunch conversation in your college, you know?
Right.
So it was always put on the back burner, even though I had to
be a normal woman, because women, you know, were looked at as you're a woman, you are going to have kids, you're going to get married, everything's fine, there's nothing, fertility doesn't necessarily exist.
Sure. And it's hard when it's not an outside scar or outside deformity or outside something going on, and people can't see that you're in pain or see that you have something growing in you, or not growing in you, or, you know, whatever may be going on. It's hard for people to understand. And that goes for any disease, whether it's traumatic brain injury, or, you know, PCOS, endometriosis, some cancers. If they can't see it, they don't believe it or understand it. And then that's always been like that. It's been that even in contact sports, you know, sometimes you can have an internal bruise and you're limping, but because you're not swollen out and nasty, no one really cares. You know, it's the same thing, because, you know, with PCOS and endometriosis, you're not swollen out and you're not nasty. You're not showing bruises and you're not showing the scars and pain that you're having. And every single person is different too. And that's really hard to understand, that I can be sitting right next to somebody else who's been suffering with PCOS their entire life, and our stories are completely different. The diseases are just so unique and rare and do their own thing to people that it's so hard to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who has it, because you're like, well, my work, you don't get it. You know, it doesn't get it at all. It's really hard to figure out.
Right.
So when I was doing all this working out and running and whatnot, I was kind of bringing up to my doctor some of the things that I was saying or seeing in progress of my diseases. And he was like, still at the end of the day, I don't believe this is going to really, you know, he's an athlete himself too. And he's like, I just don't think this is what's going to happen. Like, the writing's on the wall. Let's go ahead and schedule a hysterectomy for you later in this fall.
And how old were you at that point when they were recommending a hysterectomy?
This was, I mean, my mid-20s. So it was spring of 2014, just months before I actually ended up conceiving later down the road. And so I just didn't like it. I didn't like hearing what I was saying, or, you know, what was being said to me. And I kind of just bucked the system. I just said, I'm not doing this. Like, I'll see you for my checkup in a year. I'm out. So I, again, went on some research. As few support groups that were out there in 2014, I tried to join and read and do as much as I could. But I just kept going forward. When after finally being diagnosed with celiac disease, which changed my diet completely. I'd had problems with just some health problems and with thirst problems, and I've been tested for diabetes a million times, and no one understood that it could have been something else besides celiac disease. So I kind of pushed for that, and I made sure that was tackled and diagnosed, and that completely changed my diet, which again, when there's less inflammation going on, it helps with the PCOS, it helps with endometriosis.
So with celiac, not a lot of people know that a lot of celiac sufferers are infertile and they have fertility issues. Mm-hmm. So can you elaborate on what celiac is and how that affected, not only how you ate, but how you exercised and then conceiving?
So celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. Essentially, your body's attacking each other, and it's in your intestines, in your intestines. So it's the villi, and if you remember science class from high school, you have all these little hairs called villi in your intestines, and that's what absorbs nutrients, that's absorbs water, that's where you get your health. Anything that processes through that's where it's going to go into your system from there. When you have celiac disease, it's literally gluten is burning those small little hairs. So the less hairs you have and the more damaged and the more sick they are, the less they can absorb the things you're eating and the things you're drinking. So someone who's been suffering for quite some time with celiac disease essentially just doesn't have hairs. You've got little nubs, you've got some 5 o'clock shadow, but that's about it. You don't really have your little hairs in there anymore. And at that point, you're constantly thirsty. You're drinking and drinking and drinking, and water's not going in, so you're dehydrated. You're malnourished because you're not getting all of the vitamins and minerals and things you're eating. So you can double and triple what your normal consumption should be, and it's still not going into you. Fats pass through very easily, so you end up going to the bathroom a lot more and having really nasty bowel movements. And it just overall, it keeps stripping your body. So of course, if you're malnourished and you're dehydrated and things aren't going well, that affects fertility. You got to have the right stuff in there for it to be working. Yeah. And so if you've been suffering for years and years with that, it only fuels the fire. It's also going to fuel your endometriosis, and it's going to fuel your PCOS or whatever other disease you have going on, because you're not nourished. You're not getting the foods and things you need into you to combat these diseases and come back to where you should be. So changing my lifestyle with food on that was huge, because now I'm healing my gut. And when I'm healing my gut, it allows everything else to start, healing as well. So it kind of all went hand in hand, and it was kind of a beautiful process to watch my body change. And my workouts were getting better because I was stronger and I was healthier, and it was just a very exciting spiral forward. That doesn't mean I still had bad days and I was still bleeding for, weeks on end. I still had pain, and, it doesn't go away. Endometriosis isn't a curable disease, but it can be managed with the right things in your life. So I saw just progress going forward with all of my good feelings and things like that. And this was in spring of 2014. Of course, I wasn't on birth control anymore, so I was tracking my fertility myself. I use an awesome app called Clue that is just wonderful, I believe, in tracking your fertility. It tracks everything monthly. It gives you projections of what's going to happen next. I mean, you can track everything down to if you're having a sad day, if you have extra pimples, you can track everything on this app. And it's truly, I've written to them several times to tell them my story, because I believe in it that much, and I still use it today. But I was dead on in the middle of my fertile window, according to this little app. And my husband and I were able to conceive months after I was told to have a full-blown hysterectomy. I mean, if it had been the doctor's choice, my surgery would have been probably scheduled the next month. Yeah. So it's crazy to me to think about that. Like, it was just the right timing. Now, it doesn't mean there wasn't problems along the way. I went in, I knew I was pregnant at 3.5 weeks when I took a test. My first ultrasound was very, very early at 3.5 weeks. They found not only Gunner, my little zygote, my little guy there, but they also found a cyst on my ovary that was twisting my ovary. I originally called the doctor when I found out I was pregnant because I was in such horrible pain. I thought maybe I had an ectopic pregnancy. I didn't know what was going on. So I had this cyst that was just twisting my ovary and just really just working it quite a bit. And I was told I was ticking time bomb, that if this cyst successfully twisted my ovary, that it would burst, the ovary would burst, and I would have a very, very small window to get to the hospital for emergency surgery, or my life was terminal. Obviously my son's life was terminal. We were essentially done. That's scary to think about, that any second something could burst. So it's funny and it's not funny. That was on a Tuesday, and I had an upcoming half marathon the following weekend. So 4 or 5 days away. And I literally looked at my doctor and said, I'm going to run this marathon anyway, this race anyways. Like, I can't sit there and like wait to something to happen. He's like, do what you ever got to do. He's like, I know you're going to do it anyways at this point. He's like,
you were determined.
Yeah. Just go ahead and make sure people are surrounded by you that know what's going on and can, whisk you away to the hospital and get you the treatment you need if something happens.
Yeah. So there is no, other than waiting for this cyst to rupture, could you have gone in to have the procedure done beforehand, or was that not an option?
That wasn't even given to me as an option on the table. So honestly, I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if it was too close to where, my egg was, if that was going to be a problem, or I was never even given that option. So honestly, I don't have the answer to that. I have no idea. I was just told to wait and see what happens, which maybe the doctor didn't know. I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So essentially, I went ahead and ran this race, and in the meantime, had to tell my now husband, then boyfriend, that we were pregnant. I had all kinds of stresses going on. We weren't telling anybody we were pregnant. So I literally had to tell people all around me in this area, and I was going out of town, what was happening, but not telling what was happening. Just, hey, if I look sick or I fall down, take me to the hospital.
Right. Tell people, because at that point you realize that your pregnancy is not, set in stone. That,
right.
You have
it's 4.5 weeks in. Yeah.
And so you just don't know, and you didn't want to take that risk.
Yeah. So luckily, where I was running in Virginia Beach, one of my good friends, his mom lives there. And I told her, I said, could you just call your mom? Because sometimes you just need a mom. I don't care if it's yours or not. You just need to know that a mom's going to be there. Right. So I had her, on speed dial on my phone and ready to go. And so essentially I ran this race, and it was the most hot, humid race I've ever run in my entire life. Absolutely miserable. Blood's pumping, sweat's pouring, like, it's awful. And so a half marathon is, 13.1 miles. In the last about 3 miles or so, I had an absolutely horrible side pain. Not like a runner's cramp, like the worst stabbing, punching, just beat up pain I've ever felt in my entire life. Of course, you have to keep running, because what else do you do? So
right. You gotta get back somehow.
And it kept going, and I was just dealing with it. I thought maybe it was just an extra cramp because of the pregnancy. You're young, don't really know much about this kind of stuff. So I get to the finish line, and I meet some friends, and I'm still in pain, and I'm not telling anybody what's going on. I'm just kind of sucking it up as you're having your post-race foods and celebrations and whatnot. And later that day, I kind of stayed in my hotel room, and I was bleeding some. And so I, got onto WebMD, which is the worst thing you can do sometimes when you're scared.
Anything like that is you're dying.
Literally, I killed my kid or this and this, and I had all these different things. I couldn't tell anybody. I was just sitting there kind of scared by myself. So long story short, I didn't die that weekend, obviously, but I had an ultrasound the following Monday just to follow up on how the progress of the cyst was. It was already scheduled. And I'd been spot bleeding since that race. And I, told the doctor what was going on, and we did an ultrasound. He said, look, the cyst is gone. I was like, excuse me? Wow. This has been a week. What's happening? So the consensus was, after he reviewed it and he talked to a fellow doctor in the practice, was my cyst ruptured during that race, and it was the best case scenario I could possibly be in. The blood overturned, the cells overturned, the sweating, heat, it just made the perfect storm for my body to absorb that and to not twist the ovary.
Wow.
And I couldn't have been in a better position for that thing to rupture.
Yeah.
So the doctor literally looked at me and said, you running that race saved your son's and your life.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So you can't really get any better than that for a fitness story. People use fitness as it saved my life from drugs or addiction. It literally, like, had I not been running right then and there, I may not be here right here to tell a story.
Right.
So that, if that doesn't fuel you to keep running and keep doing fitness the rest of your life, I don't know what does.
Right. So right now, let's talk about, you had Gunnar, so you now have a almost 2-year-old,
mm-hmm.
And he's the most vivacious and just active young man that I think I've ever seen. What are some of your recommendations for those that are suffering from celiac disease, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, maybe in the subfertile category that aren't sure of what to do, and they've gone and seen their doctor, they've been diagnosed. What are some of your recommendations for their fitness and nutrition journey?
I always say try to get as many opinions as possible, and that can be both in the medical field, because I'm not knocking the medical field, but sometimes they have to be a jack of all trades. They have to have so much knowledge on other things that, small things like my scenario may not have been heard to them. So get as many opinions as you possibly can. I know it's hard with insurance and things like that, but ask as many questions as possible. Ask to see other doctors in the same practice to get different opinions. But honestly, these days, some of the online support groups are better than any medical advice you could possibly get, because it's people like me and it's people who've had the similar diseases telling their story and saying this is what worked. And when you get to talk to 500 people on a chat board saying what worked for you, and they give you all the opinions, sometimes that's more than a doctor's ever seen with the exact same scenario. So you get a lot more personal attention than you would sometimes. And so I truly believe in just gather yourself with as many people who have been there as possible. And that's really hard for some people because they don't want to tell their story. Right. And it's still very, very hard to talk about, bleeding and cramps and things growing on lady parts at the dinner table. Right. But it needs to be talked about. And sometimes by doing that, you find out your aunt was sick, and she had no idea. I didn't even know my mom had, when I was diagnosed with cervical cancer when I was 25, I didn't even know my mom had cervical cancer until I called her to tell her that that's what I was dealing with. Right. Just don't talk about that kind of stuff. And so I truly encourage anybody who's going through any of that is just to talk, to be as open and gross and whatever as you possibly need to get people fired up about it and talking. Because sometimes people don't even know what's going on and they'll ask you a question just wanting to learn about you. And you think, I never thought to research that. And you research it and you find an answer for something you didn't even know you could fix for yourself. Right. So I truly believe, so whether it's fitness experts, it's chat boards, it's a friend, a neighbor, just talk. And you'll find as much information as you can possibly get through there. And that's the beauty of social media. Everyone wants to tell our story and get the things out there. So you'll find your nutrition, you'll find your workouts, you'll find medicines, you'll find holistic medications. There's so much information out there. So that's my biggest mantra, is to get out there and find information.
Yep. And now there's more and more, like our business, Fit for Fertility. There is other businesses out there that are specializing in fitness and nutrition for infertility and male factor and female factor infertility. So I think it's becoming more, people are becoming more aware and are offering more services that are specific to what we suffer from. So what currently is your next goal, your next fitness goal in the next 6 months or so? What are you doing nowadays?
So right now, my biggest thing is I'm doing a lot of at-home HIIT workouts. I love the high intensity, and the speed drills remind me of kind of my roots of basketball, softball, all those kind of little camps that I used to do. I used to love running, like I said, my whole story. But where I've moved to now is much more flat, and I'm more of a neighborhood kind of setting. I don't have that beautiful kind of God's country, realm all around me. So I've kind of shifted to another thing that I could love and I can get myself out of. And this is kind of bringing me back to my old days. As my son gets older, and I'm already seeing it as he's ditching the stroller and wanting to walk next to me when we go on walks in the evenings and things, I'm excited to watch him grow with me. So eventually I can throw him in the vehicle and we can drive the hour back home to where we're from, and I can show him kind of what brought him about, all the beautiful mountains and things. But right now, in the next 6 months, I'm just gaining strength back. Because my son is so crazy, and my husband said it's my fault because I've fueled him with adrenaline in his blood while he was forming from running so much. Yeah. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't sleep at all. So essentially we've been awake for 2 years now that he's been alive. Wow. So with that, it's hard to build strength. Your muscles have to recover while you sleep. So that's my goal in the next 6 months, is just, I've had my workouts there and I've had my health, but I just want to start seeing the progress again for myself. I want to see the growth in my shoulders. I want to see the growth in my backside. I want to see my calves get bigger again. Because essentially when I got pregnant, I was the best shape of my life. I mean, it was incredible. If you could see old pictures of me, I look at them and go, it's amazing what the body can do despite all odds. So for just personally for me, I want to get back to that again. So hopefully that means in the next 6 months, he ages a little bit and he sleeps a little more. And I can recover a little more.
Get some rest.
Right.
Well, and so you post on your personal page, the Kelly Jane Fitness, on Instagram and on Facebook, and then we have the blog and we have our 500C workouts. So, is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with? Don't give up. I have so many people that in my life that have had some of the same diseases that I've had, and they've looked at me and said, I've tried everything. And when I look at them and say, have you talked to any fitness specialists and talked about anything you could do in your everyday life with your health and fitness, not drug, not, going in for shots or hormones? Have you looked at your health, from your perspective? And everyone always says no. They haven't thought about fitness as a medicine. And that would be the biggest thing I would tell somebody is if you've tried everything, there's one more thing to try. And that's where fertility comes in. And that's really, really special. I'm really glad to be a part of this because it's something that I can passionately talk about because I know it works. I've been there. I've done that. And I understand it won't work for everyone. There's always, the chance that it won't. But I guarantee the majority is worth the shot of trying. So I definitely believe in this. That's great. Well, and even if, it doesn't necessarily lead to a natural pregnancy, fitness and nutrition is so important just for our well-being as a single human being. So, well, Kelly, thank you. I appreciate your time, and we're going to get back to work, and we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you.